Muy bien, me retiro entonces. Buena sesión, muchas gracias.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on which part of the world you might be viewing from. Welcome back to the 7th Regional Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction in the Americas and the Caribbean, or RP21. The apt theme is Building Resilient Economies in the Americas and the Caribbean. Earlier this morning, we saw the opening ceremony. It took place earlier. And now we make room for our sessions and our robust discussions. Now, kindly allow me to acknowledge the government of Jamaica, specifically the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, or CDEMA, and the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR. We also acknowledge and recognize that there are multi-stakeholders, other sectors, organizations, and agencies that are a part of this very important ecosystem. Now, I am Dr. Terry Carrell-Reed, and I have the pleasure of serving you in the capacity of host over the next couple of days. We're coming to you live from the Jamaica Conference Center, but we are fully aware that this is a global community. Therefore, whether you are watching via the Hopin platform or perhaps you are watching via YouTube, Twitter, or perhaps Facebook on our broadcasting partners page, please let us know where you are viewing from, your country, your nationality, your flag, your time zone. We would like to know. Now, inclusion is a must for us here. Therefore, a los hispanohablantes, bienvenidos. Es un placer tenerle a ustedes con nosotros. Y yo estoy segura que este evento será muy informativo. We're very happy to also let you know that we have Spanish translators that are here at your service. Now, for our French speakers, I am certainly not fluent. Je parle français un petit peu. Bon, bienvenue, c'est un plaisir. And thankfully, we also have French translators for you as well. Now, our hearing impaired as well as deaf communities cannot be left behind, and therefore, we're so happy and we acknowledge our international sign language interpreters. Now, please go ahead and use the hashtags RP21, hashtag Sendai Americas, hashtag ResilientJA, hashtag Resilient Caribbean, just to get your other parts of your network involved. We're extremely happy to have you, and we cannot wait to hear the kinds of conversations we are going to have. So now our carefully curated sessions begin. From the topic to the organizers, to the moderators and the speakers, we have had a great time putting these persons together. So we start with the very first high-level session, and the topic and the title is Americas and Caribbean, the Resilience Building Challenge for the Next Decades. The organizers are the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDEMA, Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, and the Coordination Center for the Prevention of Natural Disasters in Central America. It is my pleasure to welcome the moderator, Elizabeth Riley, Executive Secretary of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDEMA. She will go ahead and introduce the speakers. Do enjoy.
Honorable Minister. Honorable Ministers, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the high-level session 1 of the 7th Regional Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction in the Americas and the Caribbean, RP21. as we examine the topic, the Resilience Building Challenge for the Next Decades. My name is Liz Riley. I am the Executive Director of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDEMA, and I will be your moderator for this session. The COVID-19 pandemic, a global disaster of epic proportions, has transformed our world, affecting millions of people. It has exposed existing vulnerability, exacerbated social inequities, and derailed development trajectories. The social impact has been high, particularly for women, children, older persons, and persons with disabilities. COVID-19 has certainly made our resilience journey more complex. Superimposed against the backdrop of climate change and the associated increases in damage and losses, as well as the plethora of other hazards affecting us here in the Americas and the Caribbean. Certainly, the experiences in Caribbean SIDS over 2020 to 2021 in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Haiti, Guyana, and Suriname have demonstrated this complexity. It has also reiterated the systemic nature of risk and impacted the pace of attainment of the Sendai framework targets, and by extension, the comprehensive disaster management strategy targets in our Caribbean space. Today's session, taking place just 1 year before the intergovernmental midterm review of the Sendai framework, which is scheduled for 2023, presents a unique and timely opportunity to reflect on and take stock of the most salient challenges from the perspective of different stakeholders in the region for accelerating the implementation of the Sendai framework for resilience building, including in specific country contexts. So what are we aiming to achieve from today's session? Well, there are three things. We want to identify difficulties or constraints faced by various countries and stakeholders based on past experience to prioritize actions to improve resilience. We want to provide key elements for consideration on how to improve disaster risk governance and risk management systems. And third, we want to highlight how international solidarity and cooperation can help solve these issues locally and nationally, and recommit to accelerating progress towards disaster risk reduction and the Sustainable Development Goals. So today's session will commence with 5-minute opening statements by each of our esteemed panelists. Subsequently, specific questions will be directed to each of our panelists, and they will be given the opportunity to respond. And finally, we move to a discussion session with 2 lead interventions before we wrap the session up and conclude on the key messages which are emerging. So let me start by taking you to our panel. We have the benefit of contributions from a very distinguished 5-member panel, hailing from Costa Rica, from Brazil, from UN Women, the US Geological Survey, as well as UN ECLAC. And we're going to invite each member of the panel to share perspectives on this general question. With the experience of the COVID-19 pandemic and its effects on different groups, and considering the current impacts observed in the Americas and the Caribbean due to the climate crisis, and from the perspective of the organization you represent, what are the main challenges in order to build resilience in the Americas and the Caribbean in the next decade? And we'll go first to Her Excellency Epsie Campbell Barr. Her Excellency is the Vice President and Foreign Minister of Costa Rica and is the first Afro-descendant woman to hold this high position in the American continent. Formerly holding the positions of Deputy and Minister of Foreign Relations and Worship, she is a researcher and human rights activist on issues related to women, Indigenous peoples, Afro-descendants, human development, social inclusion, and the environment. Her Excellency graduated as an economist and has master's degrees in international cooperation for development and in advanced techniques of management and political decision. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Muy buenos días o buenas tardes, depende de dónde se encuentren. Quisiera saludar a todos las participantes y panelistas que comparten conmigo este espacio y felicitar a la Oficina de las Naciones Unidas para la reducción del riesgo de desastres por la organización de este importante evento, así como a las agencias que auspiciaron tan importante actividad. Quiero felicitar además a la Coordinación del Caribe por tener la posibilidad de hacer un intercambio regional sobre estas experiencias. El primer desafío que tenemos que colocar en la mesa a nivel de políticas públicas es la forma en que existen efectos diferenciados del cambio climático en los diferentes grupos poblacionales. Particularmente quisiera resaltar el impacto del cambio climático en las mujeres, las comunidades rurales, las comunidades afrodescendientes e indígenas y aquellas comunidades más pobres que habitan los países insulares y caribeños, así como las zonas de más alta vulnerabilidad a los desastres naturales. Y es importante hacer esta diferenciación para que pongamos la mirada en el financiamiento del cambio climático, en la resiliencia y la adaptación y mitigación de estas comunidades. O sea, el primer gran desafío es colocar...
First big challenge is to set the financing in the resilience, adaptation, and mitigation in the most vulnerable communities. The recent hurricanes in the Central America and the Caribbean have proven that. That's why we just need to make urgent decisions at the regional and national level, setting the priorities on those who are the most vulnerable. It's also important to set all the communities as the main characters in all the different phases of these emergencies, not only as people that are needed or are being impacted of this, they also have the capabilities for being adapted and building this resilience. In terms of the Costa Rican example, we have made a progress for this resilience for the climate change, and that allows us to reset the goals and set our communities as the main characters in the different stages. And taking into account the pandemic of COVID-19 and everything that implies in the environmental and economic scope of the recovery. In the pandemic and post-pandemic area, we just need to plan the economic recovery by understanding that this emergency is demanding specific actions, and also taking in the perspective that we need to have this risk management as a long-term topic that we need a different approach. In these regards, I could enlist some of the different challenges, such as the national system development for the disaster risk management. The risk management and the climate change, as well as decarbonization system, are also demanding, and I also to highlight not only the participation of social stakeholders, but also all the calls that we just need to do from the state in public policy perspective. The assessment and improvement of these articulation mechanisms of social topics and the need of the different indicators where we can measure the performance as well as the efficiency of such organization and agency. I also would like to finish by saying that the main challenges that we are looking at is to promote an active participation and also integrated by the private sector to promote a greater participation from the communities and the civil society organized by them to get this organization and to promote that the local capacities are better for the response of disasters and to be autonomous for this decision-making process, as well as the access to resources to promote for all these inclusion of disaster risk management to guarantee women as one of the main stakeholders in all the stages in the process, because they have a better and greater scope of all of these. They can improve the management of the different emergency processes with an organization of the local and national governments with private companies, and to strengthen the participation and planning of the different processes for the recovery based on reconstructing better and not to reproduce vulnerability. Finally, to get the different resources and allocate them in a more equitative, with equity, and to get the emergency and the process. So also when I would like to get the different mechanisms where we can get the access to information to all the population, but essentially the need of setting the priorities of what we can call the financial protection. And that is the most relevant topic, the most urgent topic for the risk planning process, and its attention should be addressed to adapting a financial strategy for risks, the potential estimation of the losses, and the generation of the different instruments for the protection and availability of resources. Among the different aspects that we also need to take into consideration is to determine the value of the public assets and the contingent liabilities so they can be incorporated in the different fiscal estimations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And I think this sets the panel discussion on a very exciting start. You have covered a range of topics in your 5-minute intervention, from the global challenge of climate change, the role of communities, the specific issues around recovery, and particularly recovery from the pandemic. So let us move then from that macro perspective given by Her Excellency and zero in on a more local context. And it's my pleasure to welcome our next panelist, Senor Dario Jorge Giolo Sadi, who was elected mayor of Campinas, Brazil in 2021. He is a physician who specializes in neurology, and his public career began in the 1990s. He was elected city councilor for 5 consecutive terms and is the author of relevant bills focused on the area of health and the environment. His tenure as president of the Metropolitan Chamber and Parliament of Campinas in 2005 to 2006 brought greater integration between the municipalities and more investments by the state and federal governments for the region, mainly in the areas of safety, environment, and health. Senor Sadi, you have the floor.
Good morning or good afternoon. First, I would like to thank by the invitation to participate in this event. Campinas is a Brazilian city in the state of São Paulo with 1,150,000 people. We are the center of the metropolitan region with more than 3 million people. We develop actions to improve the capacity of response to disaster situations, and we invest a lot in support to the productive sector, in social protection, in training to reduce the impact of disasters and emergencies, such as the COVID-19 pandemic in the municipal economy. In Campinas, we work together with the government of the state of São Paulo and based of national and international guidelines to face the disease. We had the effort and an entire arm of health professionals beyond the union of all public sectors in one committee to face the pandemic. The committee gave the coordinates for action many times hard for our health system to remain resilient even in the middle of the most critical periods of pandemic. We had over 200 patients with disease waiting for an intensive care bed and nursery wards. And even so, the system did not collapse. Campinas is the first city in the state of São Paulo to monitoring fauna through a technology innovate and the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, the platform of wide health information system. We even conducted a great public health simulate with 90 professionals using the system. We simulate everything that must be unleashed in a yellow fever emergency. Since the meeting of the wild animals dead to the suspected infections until the planning actions to prevent the disease from affecting population. We have recurring plans for preventing disasters in all fields. At this time, we prepare for the summer operations in order to minimize consequences of heavy and temporal rain. Our prevention works includes major actions, R1 billion investment for the construction of dams to avoid flooding in neighborhoods on the edge of streams and the rivers of the city. In addition, features such as installation of flood alert sensors, training of community agents to measure levels of rain, and removal of families from risk areas. We cannot forget the role of our teams in drug periods. We registered only between May and September of this year 471 outbreaks of fire in Campinas, an increase of 76% compared to 2020. With the partnership of the burn of the firefighters, we include a voluntary brigade with community members prepared to assist face burns in rural and forest areas. Also, I call your attention to the local law established to prohibit fire, to prepare land or clean it, in addition to safety work that spans the practice of releasing balloons. We are certified since 2013 by the United Nations as the first Brazilian city model of a good habits in building resilience to reduce risks and disasters. In the same way, we were pioneers in developing the EU Resilient Communities project in one local risk area subject to flooding. the municipal government was still conquered. In 2019, the United Nations Sasakawa Awards for Disaster Reduction through our civil defense. The choice was made by the unique approach of sustainable community and commitment to include all vulnerable groups in mapping to mitigate risks. To finish, I remind that our resistance plan for Campinas is context update. The plan gathers the municipal government's best efforts to provide life dignified for the population. It is a document that guides our actions, and that I personally make sure that it is complied. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sadi. And of course, we do have an opportunity to hear a lot more about the initiatives in your municipality when we come back to the intervention a little bit later. But I want to thank you very much for sharing on your perspectives on the role of governance that came through very clearly in the resilience building efforts going forward, and also use of technology, including for support of early warning systems. So thank you very much for that contribution. We look forward to hearing from you again shortly. So earlier in my opening remarks, and also in the contribution from Her Excellency a bit earlier, we talked about the differential impact of the pandemic on different groups. And certainly women was one of those groups that was identified. So it is appropriate that our next speaker, Ms. Maria Noel Biasa, is joining us today. She is the Regional Director of UN Women for Latin America and the Caribbean. She is an architect by profession, with postgraduate studies in urban planning from the National Autonomous University of Mexico and the University of Chile. And she has over 40 years of professional experience. She has been a consultant for the Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean of the United Nations Environment Program and coordinator of the Regional Training Program to improve urban and environmental management in Latin America and the Caribbean at UN ECLAC. Ms. Maria Noel Biasa, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We are hearing you well. Please continue.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm afraid the CV that you mentioned is not mine because I'm not from Mexico. I'm from Uruguay, and I have 30 years in the UN system, but not in human development. But it doesn't matter. What I am right now is working as Regional Director of UN Women for the Americas and the Caribbean. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you so much for the invitation that the Regional Director, Raul Salazar, did to me. And for you, Madame Liz, really, thank you very much for moderating. Es un placer compartir este panel con la señora vicepresidenta.
A pleasure to also share with the Vice President of Costa Rica, Epsi Campbell. I do not know if Madam Alicia Barcelona is going to join us later on, but it is such a great honor for me to be able to share with you, and also with the mayor of Campinas, who just addressed a couple of words to all of us, and also the CARICOM authorities. So I would like to tell you that from UN Women, just taking part in this high-level session for Latin America and the Caribbean on building resiliency is a key part. Why? Because women are always left behind. For that reason, it is important to address gender issues. I would like to congratulate the government of Jamaica for this great opportunity that they have granted us just by hosting this event in the Caribbean and also in this area of our region that is proner, along with Latin America, to face this type of disasters. For that reason, I am really pleased to be able to address a couple of words to you. on the significance of women, the role they play when it comes to just running this transformative gender analysis. It would not be enough just by having a mainstream, as we call it. We have to talk about this transformational impact. The crisis arising from this pandemic, natural or social natural disasters in this region has also led to losses, damages, and the outcome of all of this has placed women in other type of adverse situation, as in the case of Haiti and the earthquake, tropical storms in Central America and all over the Caribbean, and also forest fires, well, wildfires that we have seen, flooding in the south of Latin America as well. So in this framework, I can tell you that our region is quite vulnerable to the impact of climate change. For that reason, I am congratulating actually that we're about to host the COP. Hopefully we can get a positive outcome out of that so that we can just make sure that the world is not going to have other type of, let's say, climate change issues. On the contrary, we are going to work to revert their impact. So we know that natural disasters or social natural disasters are going to amount to $100 million. These are humongous numbers that our governments are not used to taking into account, and now they need to start including them as part of their budgets. We have up to 17 million persons in Latin America who are at risk or of being displaced due to this climate change impact as well. I'm talking about the whole population of a country like Ecuador. I mean, the whole population of Ecuador amounts to this number. So the impact of social natural disasters somehow also undermines, and as well, it also makes this type of inequalities more evident, specifically concerning these subjects. For that reason, we would like to ask you to please take women and girls into account, to engage them when just facing this type of issues and situations, so that no women, no girl is left behind. In this context, it is key to ensure that we can have some sort of response so that we can empower women, girls, and for us to be able to ensure the cross-sectorial management internally and externally as well. It is important to just find what is the role that is played by these women ministries, organizations, and also civil society organizations led by women. For that reason, it is important to recognize and put women's leadership at the center of this conversation, and also agenda in terms of women, peace, security is mainly focused on social conflict. Humanitarian disasters transcend borders, and they also get to these human disasters such as wildfires, climate change as well. So recognizing that these disasters could be just the outcome of human activities also entails recognizing that we can work for us to be able to prevent them, not only to rebuild the social tissue that has been impacted on by a disaster, but also to put women at the center when it comes to responding. So we would like to tell you that when developing quick gender analysis in emergency situations is key, specifically, like I said, to focus and put women at the center of this response. This is the end of my intervention, but I like to be time aware, so thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ms. Noel Vesa. And I do apologize for the CV descriptor that was read earlier, and we will certainly try to ensure that we have that correct prior to the close of the session, but I accept your graciousness with respect to that. And of course, the contribution that you made in outlining the role of women as we look towards the resilience challenge over the next 10 years is a very significant one for the Americas and the Caribbean. And you've outlined many aspects of the dynamics related to that, including the important role of women and their leadership in that conversation. So thank you very much. So now we turn our attention to a slightly more technical lens on the topic of the resilience challenge over the next 10 decades. And I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Dave Applegate. And Dr. Applegate is the Associate Director for the Natural Hazards Center in Colorado. And today he is exercising the delegated authority of the Director of the U.S. Geological Survey, an organization that he has been with since 2004. He co-chairs the Interagency Science for Disaster Reduction Working Group and co-leads the Department of the Interior's Strategic Sciences Group. He is also a full-time adjunct professor at the University of Utah's Department of Geology and Geophysics, and has also served with the U.S. Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources as the American Geophysical Union's Congressional Science Fellow and professional staff member. Dr. Applegate has a BSc in Geology from Yale University and a PhD in Geology from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Dr. Applegate, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the floor.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this important dialogue. And I want to express appreciation to Jamaica for hosting the regional platform, to the UN DRR, to SEDIMA, and the other organizations that have organized this session. I am pleased to be here on behalf of the U.S. National Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction, and pleased to be part of such a distinguished panel from whom I am already learning a great deal. Building resilience is a team sport. As climate change and now COVID-19 have shown us, global and regional collaboration, scientific exchange, effective stakeholder engagement, and coordinated actions are critical to addressing complex and cascading hazards. The Biden-Harris administration has prioritized the need to address a set of 4 converging crises, including the COVID pandemic and the climate crisis, as well as advancing racial equity and restoring the economy. Addressing all of these crises is necessary to achieve resilience for the US and the world. Ensuring that collaboration can take place is vital, but it also requires us to create spaces to hear underrepresented voices and ideas. We need to ensure that progress in addressing these crises reaches those who need it the most. Today, I would like to highlight 4 challenges that we are taking steps toward addressing as a global and regional community. The first of those is data sharing. Open and free data exchange across national borders helps bolster scientific advances and gets critical data to those who need it during a crisis. An example of progress is the International Charter for Space and Major Disasters, which greatly expands the array of Earth observation resources available to those responding to disasters. As we look ahead, the Unified Data Policy, just approved by the UN World Meteorological Organization, provides an essential policy framework to improve critical environmental predictions based on a full range of Earth system observations. The second challenge is building partnerships and collaborations between and among nations, which is essential to making progress on disaster risk reduction. Creating effective forums and platforms for international exchanges and collaboration can be quite challenging, and the pandemic has only made that more so. However, these collaborations pay huge dividends when implemented well, offering new insights, discoveries, and partnerships that can make each nation involved more resilient and better prepared for the next disaster. The U.S. Caribbean Resilience Partnership is a great example of collaboration with national meteorological and hydrological services and national disaster management agencies to advance early warning and preparedness capacity for hurricane-related hazards. Responding to concurrent and cascading hazards is the third challenge. Over the past year and a half, we have grappled with response to catastrophic events such as hurricanes, wildfires, and earthquakes, all amid a global pandemic. Emergency response and science agencies have had to quickly rethink evacuation, sheltering, and response using evolving epidemiological understanding and while under intense pressure. Cascading and compounding hazards are also an important and growing challenge. As the frequency and intensity of hazards associated with climate change continue to increase, the consequences of these concurrent and cascading hazards will only increase. As we move forward as a region, we must rapidly learn from these events and apply best practices to prioritize resources, tailor public messaging, and response activities, and collaborate to ensure that we are better prepared in the future. The fourth challenge is incorporating underrepresented communities and voices into resilience building efforts. Over the past year, the COVID-19 pandemic further emphasized what we already knew to be true. Certain underrepresented groups are disproportionately impacted by disasters. This trend is one that we have seen in every disaster. We must work at local, national, regional, and global levels to center those disproportionately impacted by disasters in designing a path toward resilience for everyone, not just the fortunate few. Incorporating underrepresented groups into regional and national planning discussions and policymaking ensures that those most likely to be hardest hit by disasters are able to take the lead in formulating solutions to protect their communities and livelihoods. COVID-19 has shown us that if some of us aren't safe, none of us are truly secure. As we all strive toward the same goal of resilience, the more ideas, the more information, the larger the team, the better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave, for that contribution. And I think you very squarely placed the political posture of the government of the United States and this current administration on the table. Thanks for doing that. And I think the four challenges that you outlined were certainly very clear and I think have resonated well with members of the panel and I dare say members of the audience as well, certainly within the Caribbean context on the points on the cascading and the concurrent hazards. So happy to come back to that when we get into the other questions. Thanks for your contribution. So one of the points that Dave mentioned was the point of open and free data exchange. And our next contributor has worked in this area for many years. Mr. Rolando Ocampo is the director of the Statistics Division of UN ECLAC, and he has held this post since August of 2019. He is an actuary and holds master's degrees in statistics and economics of education and labor from universities in Madrid. He has served on the National Institute of Statistics and Geography, including on its governing board as vice president in charge of the Geographical and Environmental Information Subsystem, and then the Economic Information Subsystem. From August 2013 to December 2017, he chaired the United Nations Regional Committee on Geospatial Information Management for the Americas, or UNGGIM, and was co-chair of the UNGGIM Global from 2016 to 2017. Mr. Rolando Ocampo, I'm happy to welcome you, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. It is a pleasure to be here. Muchas gracias. Quisiera agradecer a nuestros colegas de UNDRR.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank our colleagues from UNDRR, the government of Jamaica, SEDIMA, for having us here, taking part here. And I would like to apologize on behalf of Alicia Bárcena, who was going to present, but she had a tight agenda. So it was a little bit impossible for her to be here today with us. So let me share with you about this question in particular that we are getting. We would like to start with the fact that most of the deaths caused by COVID-19, at least in a region, equal an amount to 32% of the total world death rate in terms of vaccination rates, according to numbers to September by PAHO, and that you can also find at the COVID portal in ICLAC under the completed vaccination. 77% of the population of Latin America is not fully vaccinated against COVID-19. In 1/3 of these countries of the region have only vaccinated 20% of their population. So as a consequence of this pandemic, we have also seen greater structural differences, and I would like to address them as 5 pillars. The very first gap is related to income. We have been in this situation for over a century in Latin America and the Caribbean. This is a medium income region, and since 1900, we have not had such a big drop of 6.8%. This is a big drop that we had. So as well, in terms of this tax situation, Latin America and the Caribbean also has a huge impact on GDP with 53% and with the highest also rate in terms of exports, goods, and services, which is about 59%. The digital gap is 66.2 million homes in our region in Latin America and the Caribbean does not have an internet connection. They do not have it. We have a higher school dropout rates, of course, caused by this pandemic. Also, the disruption of this face-to-face school, which has impacted on 77 million students, 67 million students. And that means that children and the youth are not going to be able to get the minimum education, and that could increase up to 20%. So we have already addressed the 4th gap that is related to gender. We have heard already that gender violence against women and girls has increased, and also an inequality in terms of caring activities. We have seen that in certain surveys, studies, those specifically that we have conducted in collaboration with UN Women as part of ECLAC. And also, it is very clear that we have found the underlying causes, and also 38 million people, 8 million more than in 2019. That's in terms of poverty. 209 million persons are in this situation. To the first quarter of 2021, the region had recovered 58% of the total jobs that had been lost. So in Latin America and the Caribbean, also we saw an increase in terms of insecurity. Food insecurity increased. 40.4% of the population was in this situation by 2020. So we're not just talking about the disaster caused by the pandemic. We are also facing the outcome of other natural disasters and its consequences in several countries of the region that were also impacted on in 2020, 2021, Yote, Guatemala, El Salvador, and also in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, also in 2021, floodings like we have already mentioned in Guyana in June 2021, and the Haiti earthquake just a couple of months ago in August. So the impact of this just happened or took place just on top of the consequences of the pandemic. And this is the situation and how things are going on in our country. So what is the main challenge? This whole context related to this environmental, economic, and social vulnerabilities. This is a middle income region that has greater and greater gaps. And we know that the insufficient growth happened, also inequality, also informal jobs as well, lower productivity as well. And with all of this impact that is going to also just start happening over time. So the main challenge that we're going to have is just retaking this growth as well, and also improving, let's say, our activities and efforts for us to be able to meet these SDGs. And also the main purpose is here not leaving anyone behind. Climate change as well. These are global challenges, and therefore the solutions cannot be exclusively national. However, they need to do it as such as well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rolando Campo, and really for telling the pandemic story from the lens of statistics and what we have seen as the change in socioeconomic profiles in Latin America and the Caribbean, and for identifying some of those key challenges with respect to how these changes are going to impact on our resilience journey as we go forward in the next decade. So thank you to all panelists for your insightful responses to the opening general question. And now we turn our attention to some more specific areas. And I'll start again with Her Excellency, Elsie Campo-Barr, Vice President of Costa Rica. And based on your experience leading a country that takes a multi-sectoral approach to advance the priorities of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, the Climate Change Agenda, and the Sustainable Development Goals, what actions are needed to accelerate progress in building resilience in a context of increasingly complex and interconnected risks? And how can these actions be inclusive and accessible to all, ensuring that those most vulnerable and disproportionately affected by disasters are not left behind?
Thank you very much. One of the important topics is specifically the bonds or the links that we have of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Climate Change Agenda, especially for the risk management agenda. I think this is essential due to the input for the development goals, as well as all the problems that are there. For instance, today, the positioning of this global collective imaginary, the climate change as an emerging factor of the risk that is going to challenge all the disasters. And the sum of all this uncertainty of the future of the planet, as well as the opportunities for the social development. These disaster management policies should include, as Mrs. Noel Baeza has mentioned, should take into account the different areas and making them the focus for the prevention and resilience built up for the socio-natural disasters. The expected result of these risk management policies with this comprehensive approach is the reduction of the losses caused by disasters, also to improve the human capabilities so we can benefit from the different opportunities, as well as the achievement of well-being goals. This is to favor the compliance of such purposes, so we can reduce uncertainty in terms of the future conditions. This is extremely relevant for the decision-making process, for the public investment, for the development of infrastructure, for the production, also to provide for the planning and for measuring, for preventing measures that will reduce all these risks. This existent factor control for mitigating the impact and the preparedness of all these emergencies. Generation of information that is appropriate for that purpose. Another topic in different declarations or statements for the climate change proposal in a more specific risk management where they are operating, also that they converge in similar projects with a similar highlight. These risk management and climate change have common or factors that demand that they need to be together to use the resources properly, especially for those that are given by the system. In the particular case of Costa Rica, both topics should be approached at the same way in the public policies as a prevention concept in the planning tools and mechanisms at the different areas in the sectors and the territory. In terms of the social inclusion, it's important to provide this robustness of the social programs for the benefit of the population, especially the poor population with these different needs. That is the case with people with disabilities, the elderly, migrants, and women that have been identified in these processes. The pandemic, as well as other disaster events, express that there is a need to make this use of resources more efficient with the intervention of integrating different programs and common goals. The approach should not only provide the attention just by being in the logic of all the people from the victims of these disasters. It also should be in emergency situation and in the perspective and risk management. This intervention social program should also reduce the vulnerability of people. Also by resettling all these communities that are in danger and promoting the system, the alert system and organization to evacuate the areas when it is needed, especially in the cases where we can have a disaster. Also, I would like to set a special data, and that is disaggregated data that could ease the measurement of the progress to reduce and to provide better results of the real vulnerability and to have better decision-making process and to get a better idea of all the affected people by these disasters, and mainly to have a better planning for the future that allow us to reduce that impact in the people and in the environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and we really appreciated your sharing those experiences with respect to the role of public policy in your country and how that has supported the resilience building efforts. And I think very importantly coming through as well was the treatment of the social dimension of resilience and the efforts that have been made towards inclusion. So we really appreciate that contribution, the insights from the approach that has been taken in your country. Thank you so much. So I want to direct the next question to our representative from UN ECLAC, Mr. Ocampo. And with the experience of the COVID-19 pandemic and its differentiated impact on vulnerable groups, and also considering the exacerbated trends of disaster impacts from other natural or geological or human-induced hazards witnessed in Latin America and the Caribbean, what do you consider to be the key public policy actions to achieve transformative recovery with equity in the context of current and potential emerging complex systemic risks?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Let me move to Spanish. Desde CEPAL, nosotros consideramos que
from the ECLAC, we can see that in order to face this challenge, the challenge that you are mentioning, the challenge of public policies in order to have a transformative recovery, we propose to have alternative criteria that is innovative in order to ensure the flows for development. We have to get this international cooperation, including medium-sized income countries, which are most of the Latin America and Caribbean countries, and to use this development for transition for us is quite important. It is also important to identify that all the different actions and per capita income is not enough to assess the progress of the countries and their sustainability. We cannot just have this per capita and the development of a country. We just need to renew all these models based on a criteria or classification that is beyond per capita, so we can have a better impact or better result of the results of the countries. What we have done as here in this region with these medium-sized income countries, we have these guides in order to assess the development and to define new cooperation ways and strategic partnerships that we have mentioned in these sessions, these private and public partnerships and how they participate in these new efforts to create the new resilience. And one of the exercises that we are trying to work on is to have this transition development. This is an analytical framework where we have all these traps of medium-sized income that would allow us to redirect the cooperation among the different sectors. Not only the private, we also include the financial and international organizations. We need to have a very close dialogue with the European Union and with the OECD in order to start boosting this development framework. We're going to use these analytic frameworks so we can provide this financing result for the rest of the region. So the concept of transition or transition development has different traps and vulnerabilities. We have environmental traps where there is a dependency to a carbon dependent pattern, and also there is a shortage of natural resources, and we have also very low technology. Also, there is a productivity trap where our exports are very low sophisticated, and there is a very low integration to the value chain. The micro, small, and medium-sized companies, they have also a very small productivity. So we also have an institutional trap because we have public services that are fragmented and not enough. So we can have we have a fiscal exemption or evasion that is quite high and very low level of public resources. And generally, as I was saying in my first participation, we have with these debt rates that are very high. Of course, social vulnerability, that there are some that have a very stronger impact. We have these volatile savings and the informality, employment is higher. So we have a different structure. All these trends, as I mentioned, are global, and they are including the different elements such as climate change, the disasters caused by natural phenomena, and the demographic changes, digital transformation. And if we do not address as a group all these environmental traps, the institution, natural and vulnerability traps, then it will be very difficult. We can see that we need to move to the development model, and this is the ECLAC proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ocampo, and your significant years of working with UN ECLAC has certainly been reflected in the insights that you shared in defining what you call the new resilience And I think that your contribution will resonate incredibly well, certainly with the territories of the Caribbean, which pose many of those, face many of those challenges which you outlined related to being upper middle income states. And I very much appreciated the point you raised with respect to the fact that the per capita income is not sufficient really for providing the guideposts with respect to decision making on the international support, and your point also on international cooperation, the fact that we have to address this issue together. I think that has resonated incredibly well. Thank you very much. So I want to pose my next question to Ms. Maria Noel Vesa, and Ms. Vesa assumed functions as the Regional Director for the Americas and the Caribbean in July 2019. And she previously worked as the Director of the Program Division at UN Women Headquarters in New York. Ms. Vesa joined UN Women from a very diverse experience within the UN system, having worked both at UN Ops as well as UNDP. And she's a national of Uruguay, and she holds a doctorate in law and social science from the University of the Republic of Uruguay and a master's degree in international public policy from Johns Hopkins University in Washington, D.C. So my question to you, considering that the social and economic crisis provoked by the COVID-19 pandemic and other disasters that occurred simultaneously to the pandemic have aggravated pre-existing gender equality gaps, impacting girls and women in a differentiated fashion, what concrete recommendations would you give in order to reduce these gaps in the context of climate change, environment, and disaster risk reduction policies and programs?
Thank you, Liz. Thank you very much. I'm going to switch to Spanish, if you don't mind. Para nosotros es fundamental abordar.
For us, it's essential to approach these gender gaps by getting these public policies in terms of climate change, the reduction of disasters, and many others. We consider that we just need to speak up about gender transformation, not only gender responsive or gender sensitive. We just need to talk about transformative effects. We think that the prompt assessment of all these disasters for men, women, and children are quite important. And it's also important to address that answer as well as the recovery efforts to the medium to long term, considering all the effects in men and women. It is also important to have this quick analysis for emergencies, the COVID emergency and the natural disaster emergencies. We have seen that, we have organized that, and that allows to all governments to have a clear idea of what's going on with women. We have made the same thing with the Iota and some other hurricanes, as well as the Haiti earthquake. Well, it is quite obvious that if we don't get women to the center of all of it, it will be very difficult to have the to be autonomous, especially when they have the recovery effects. Our office in the Caribbean, we have seen this gender inequality and the cost of all of the lack of actions. We have seen that it's very important that we just need to talk about the cost of not getting any action and the cost of not getting the women at the center of it. We just need to provide all these coordination spaces that they can address all these gender inequalities, and also to get all the different tools and mechanisms for this gender approach and human approach. It's also important to have all these dialogue sessions as we have in the regional risk and disasters area. We have a very specific division for gender so we can address the accountability and all the actions to be taken. We need to have that from a gender perspective and the rights of women and many more empowerment actions, as well as the use of this gender marker that for us, this is a transparent measure to determine how it is being used, all this effort and resources. We have all these violence actions towards women should also be more in terms of the pandemic. We have the gender violence while we have the pandemic because it has exacerbated. It is also important to keep strengthening the capabilities of national stakeholders that are also included in the prevention and risk management. This is essential that we always need to consider the gender perspective. We also need to identify within all the risk, what are the ones that care the most for women. The gender division, it's important. So when we have all the grants or subventions could be directed to women because we always have the same result. Women are not considered, therefore they don't get all these grants. Especially we just need to have the tourism or agriculture sectors where women are still working and they get all the disasters. It is also important to have the management in all the shelters areas where we can share that information. We need to share manuals and guidelines. And we just need to bear in mind that all these violence are taking place in these shelters. And lastly, it is also essential for all of us to consider these intersections of women because we are diverse, we are Afro-descendant, we are from indigenous communities, we are with the different sexual orientations and different ages. That's why it's always important to take all these elements when we have all these inputs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Maria Noel Reza, and your contributions, the terminology of the requirement for gender transformation, I think is a very strong message coming out of this opening panel. And thank you very much for breaking that down in terms of what you see the gender transformation to look like and those key actions that need to be taken. So we'll circle back to our delegate from Brazil, from Campinas, Brazil. And Mr. Dario Sadi, I want to ask you, based on the lessons learned from the COVID-19 scenario, what opportunities can cities have in terms of their planning processes and strengthening urban resilience? And how do you foresee the relevance of partnerships and articulation between national and local governments to build disaster risk reduction for urban resilience in the next decade? Over to you.
Eu vou responder em português. Campinas tem feito trabalho.
English, in Portuguese, rather. Campinas promoted an integration work with the state and federal governments to articulate actions to diminish the risk of natural disasters and also to structure its civil defense and the other bodies that act to face or to reduce risk and also natural, the disaster of natural disasters. And this integration has has to be not only in the sphere of the federal and state government administrations, but also in the municipal sphere. So we counted on different bodies of the city, including the civil defense, to articulate actions. As Campinas is the center of a metropolitan region with more than 3 million inhabitants, so this was also a regional effort. We worked with different mayors from different cities with more than 80,000 inhabitants. So we had a national effort so that cities could face not only the pandemic, but also discuss urban planning to guarantee sustainability, the preservation of the environment, and mainly social inclusion. So if our focus is not on sustainable development, future generations will pay a very high price. Campinas has this view of working together with different instances or with different areas or administrations, but also working from the national and regional point of view. So development must respect the environment and diminishing the risks of man-made or natural catastrophes, and so that when this happens, we need to have a public structure to respond to major natural disasters. I mentioned the Mayor National Front, and I act as a vice president of this effort, and I believe that the joint effort is the way forward. And so this is a municipality that organizes the land occupation to diminish risks and also preservation of the environment and to preserve our country for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sadi. And I think from your intervention, we understand why Campinas has really been showcased as an excellent example of how we need to go forward in building resilience. So thank you so much for this. And our final question on this round is to Dr. Dave Applegate. And Dr. Applegate, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2030 emphasizes the importance of a scientific basis for risk-informed development. What lessons do we learn from COVID-19 in terms of a more effective use of science and technology for policies and practice in supporting disaster risk reduction in the context of more complex, interconnected risks?
Well, thank you for that question. Two of the important lessons for the effective use of science and technology brought home by the COVID-19 pandemic are, first, the importance of integrating social and behavioral science expertise in order to effectively support disaster response. And second, we must understand and quantify disaster losses to inform mitigation and response to current crises and future disasters. To the first point, the COVID-19 pandemic is a complex disaster during which the science has been constantly evolving. When the experts in the biomedical sciences work hand in hand with the experts in the social and behavioral sciences, we can more effectively reduce risk at multiple levels and achieve the best outcomes. Incredible advances in epidemiology, vaccinology, and other areas have come out of the pandemic. This disaster has also showed that the social and behavioral sciences are equally critical. Communicating and messaging protective actions, best practices, and scientific advancements must keep pace with evolving scientific discovery. Messages delivered at the outset of such disasters must be crafted strategically in order to help all stakeholders prepare for shifting guidance and collectively receive up-to-date information. One challenging aspect of this pandemic has been understanding when and how to communicate to diverse audiences about protective actions. And the same is true for every hazard. And the social sciences are the key to understanding how to ensure that community members take full advantage of the best hazard-related science to protect their lives, livelihoods, and property. To my second lesson on the importance of tracking losses, as COVID-19 rapidly spread across the world, medical researchers understood the urgent need to track the losses it left in its wake. This real-time analysis of disaster impacts allowed decision makers to make crucial choices about reopening schools, public health messaging, provision of care, and prioritization for vaccination. In short, COVID-19 vividly emphasized the importance of quantifying disaster losses and having a data-driven approach to managing crises. As we strive towards creating a more resilient future for our region, measuring the magnitude of disaster losses will play a critical role, whether data are being analyzed in real time or there are decades between disaster events. This information helps us understand what is at stake in the face of many different hazards and allows us to understand what mitigation actions have been effective. The Sendai indicators give us a roadmap to improving disaster loss reporting, allowing nations to learn from other nations as we all work towards a similar goal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Applegate. And that contribution really connects with certainly our colleagues here in the Caribbean, particularly about the points you've raised about the social and the behavioral side of the events. And this has played out not only in the pandemic, but also with respect to a diverse set of other hazards that we face in the region. And thanks so much for putting that on the table. And certainly the evidence base for decision making is one of the messages that we send as well through our comprehensive disaster management strategy. So thanks so much. I want to thank really all of the panelists for the very comprehensive and insightful responses to those questions that were posed. And now we have the opportunity to hear from two other contributors, Ms. Miriam Urusa, who is the Secretary of Integral Risk Management and Civil Protection of Mexico City. Ms. Urusa is an architect with 40 years professional experience, and she is, of course, also a consultant for UNEP and UNECLAC's Latin America and the Caribbean offices and coordinated projects in Mexico, El Salvador, Haiti, Guatemala, and Colombia. She's also an active member of the Scientific Advisory Committee of the National Civil Protection System on Social Sciences in Mexico, and she has completed postgraduate studies in research and teaching of urbanism and at the University of Chile. She obtained a postgraduate diploma in political and social sciences in Germany as well. And it's our pleasure to welcome her to the meeting and to invite her to make her contribution. Over to you. If you can unmute your microphone. Please unmute your microphone. Could you unmute your microphone? I'm not sure if you're able to hear me. Ms. Urusa, kindly unmute your microphone. We're not able to hear you. We can't hear you. Ms. Erlusa, we're not able to hear you. Could you unmute your mic?
Eu escuto também.
Is she able to hear me? Okay, so perhaps we can go to Ambassador Slater as we work through the technical side of this. So I'm going to invite Dr. Douglas Slater, who is the Assistant Secretary General for Human and Social Development for the Caribbean Community, to come in on the discussion at this time. Ambassador Slater assumed the position of Assistant Secretary General of the Directorate of Human and Social Development of the Caribbean Community Secretariat on October the 1st of 2013. A national of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and a medical doctor by profession, Ambassador Slater previously held ministerial portfolios of foreign affairs and foreign trade and consumer affairs, as well as being the Minister of Health and the Environment in his home country. Dr. Slater has also been a part-time lecturer at the University of the West Indies, and we are happy to invite him to make his contribution. Ambassador Slater.
Thank you very much, Ms. Riley. I hope you're hearing me, just to confirm that.
We are hearing you well. Please
Great.
continue.
These are some of the challenges of the virtual world. However, let me start by sincerely expressing our gratitude to the organizers of this meeting, and I do so on behalf of Ambassador Carla Barnett, our Secretary General. We are indeed pleased to participate in this very meaningful activity, and we wish to thank the government of Jamaica, one of our own CARICOM member states, for being the host of this event. Wish to thank you, Madam Chair, as the head of our Regional Disaster Management Agency, SEDEMA, and also the representatives of UNDRR. I acknowledge the presence of Vice President and Mayor and Honorable Ministers and all of the delegates. A lot has been said, and I will try to be as concise as possible. I'd like us to address the various disasters, though, as natural. We have natural disasters such as the earthquakes, the volcanoes, some storms, but we also have a category of anthropogenic disasters or man-made, which are topical now, climate change, and they also impact on some of those natural disasters by intensification of some of the natural ones. We also have social and economic disasters, and we are doing this in the environment of the global pandemic, COVID, which is a health disaster, and a lot has been said about it. So we are here addressing resilience when we have COP going on and when we have COVID going on. Indeed, some significant challenges. I heard from all presenters, and a very common trend was the importance of inclusivity, and especially inclusion of vulnerable stakeholders. A lot has been said about the inclusion of girls and women. And yes, I think that is very important, because the leadership of girls and women is very important in addressing these challenges. We are proud to say that we are in the region have demonstrated our confidence in that by having our own, the chair of this event is the head of our disaster management agency, and we are proud to be able to demonstrate that way. Also, we have many national emergency management agencies among our member states headed by women. And just to be a little humoristic, we know that for the doctors involved here, and most know that women are naturally more resilient than us males. The life expectancy of women are, by general, a good 3-4 years or more than us men. So they have demonstrated naturally their ability to put into practice resilience, and so they earn our trust. I would like to focus on a few issues. I think in order to address all of these resilience issues, we need to recognize what are needed, what is needed, what are the issues that need to be focused on. Resources, human and financial resources. Human resources in terms of I just addressed some of it, inclusion of our women. We need to address social inclusion and to target the most vulnerable. Financial, we need to have policies geared at addressing the issues of solidarity that is needed. So I know it is accepted that in order to address these, you need financial resources. But we have heard in these discussions of the inequitable situation of the global finance and availability of resources among especially Latin America and the Caribbean. Most of us are middle-income countries, developing states, and we know that there are challenges there. We know that some of us as middle-income countries have been quote-unquote graduated away from access to concessionary financing. And I want to place on record our gratitude to the ECLAC or CEPAL for their support in us making a strong case for our vulnerabilities being more of an item to utilize as a metric in determination of our access to resources rather than our GDP. I note the issues related to communication and social science, and that is one of the areas that solidarity among member states can help by the transfer of technology, the sharing of data that we have heard of. And we saw just recently the disaster caused by COVID, how important these aspects are. We want to convey our gratitude to those member states of Latin America and Caribbean, and also to the United States for all the assistance offered. Dr. Appowit raised some issues that are very important, and the importance of sharing of technology, of scientific information, of social communication. We saw some immense challenges. Well, we are seeing vaccine hesitancy. How do we address that? And all of us will need to work together to come to a solution. We have seen some of our member states, particularly in the Caribbean, have really not just have to deal with the general challenges of climate change, which all of us are susceptible to, and now COVID, but specifically, let us say, one of our poorest countries, Haiti. We had issues there of seismic activity, earthquakes, added to that social and political challenges, and then come COVID. And so too in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the impact of the disaster of the volcano compounding already existing climate change and the COVID disaster. So all in all, I think this was a great opportunity for us to see the need for, one, working in solidarity, two, recognizing the importance of developing public policies and resilient systems to all disasters. And I think if we would address the issues and discussions raised here at the regional, at the local, to have involve all the stakeholders at local and national levels, and to also have regional, interregional, and international solidarity, we will do well in addressing. So thank you again for having us participate in this very important event. And we we anticipate your continued collaboration, and together we can do better and make all of the lives of our peoples a better, a higher quality life to live. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Slater. And that perspective from the CARICOM Secretariat is sincerely valued, and the critical role that the CARICOM Secretariat has played, certainly in this region, in promoting and supporting the political directorate in that posture of regional solidarity has been very significant in directing the quality of the region's response, certainly to COVID-19. And we do know that resilience is also one of the priority areas under the strategic direction of CARICOM as well. So thank you very much for your observations and contributions. We will try now to return to Ms. Miriam Urusa, and I hope now we have overcome the technical difficulty. And I invite you to make your contribution. Over to you.
Muchísimas gracias, Liz, y perdón a todos por esta.
Thank you very much, Liz, and my apologies for these technical issues. Good morning, everybody, and my warm greetings from Mexico City. There's no doubt that there is a sum of contributions that have enriched our lives, and to identify all the elements, to identify all the different topics that we share. I'm really thankful for your considerations to include our intervention as a local government, as Mexico City. We have started this regional platform that is unique because we all have been in the situation of how to protect the people, how to protect ourselves, and at the same time, with a lot of uncertainty, we have faced the challenge of providing solutions with all the different commitments so we can make a progress in the Sendai framework. While we just need to see what is going on within our communities and our regions, the interdependency in our systems should be a greater catalyzer for all the collaboration so we can exchange solutions, capabilities, skills, and resources in a more efficient way. Today, there are several proposals, not only for international cooperation or financing, but also the roles of the different sectors, scientific cooperation, the creation of public policies for risk, and all of these should be turned into a regional action plan. Today, sharing all these successful experiences after post-COVID recovery as part of the strategy in these local policies is playing an important role for reducing the disaster risk by strengthening resilience at the social level in the different territories, especially in this Latin American context. The economic and humanitarian impacts caused by the natural disaster, the climate change, and the recent COVID pandemic have made that these fund flows for the cooperation for helping all the people by terms of the development will continue so we can increase the capability and to speed up the sustainable recovery in all these countries. This week is key. We have talked how to move forward jointly. We just need to see what is the progress with all the institutions. And also we just need to continue to provide the different responses and proposals, and also to make the call so these measures could be taken into all societies. We also need to acknowledge that our biggest challenge is coordination, to have these dialogues and consensus among the different sectors in order to invest in the measures implementation for the protection of people and ecosystem services that could not affect furthermore or even lost. With the different interventions, with Elsie, Rolando, Dario, Maria, and many others, we know that we are making a progress, and we are going to turn from a reactive perspective to turn into a building up this resilience. And we are going to listen to others' experiences so to prevent to repeat the same mistakes. There is a long way to run, but we cannot wait any longer for the well-being of everybody. So that's why I'm calling everybody so we can be adding all these perspectives at the different sectors. We just need to promote these solidarity networks, not only for emergencies. We also need to see how much we can resist and consider what are the big range of opportunities, people, goods, and services that we need to protect. This could only be possible if we are open to innovations, if we have solid commitments that recognizes our weaknesses and set the need of a better coordination in order to improve our social protection services, such as today with COVID-19. I hope that in the future, in the near future, we can get together and celebrate all the success, all our achievements. I am allied with all of you for the local efforts and the reconstruction of resilience. We can keep supporting all the base work, and especially for those, so prevention could be the strength of the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Arusa, for your contribution, and we're really happy you were able to come in to share those experiences. So, colleagues, unfortunately, we are very much out of time. I'm really happy we were able to squeeze in the contributions from all persons. We won't be able to do the final statements as we had originally planned to, but I just want to say maybe just 2 or 3 things in terms of sort of key messages that came out from you. One is that in discussing resilience, we're discussing a complex issue, and there is a need for us to work together. And I think that came out very clearly from the presentations. We also talked about the need for new models in terms of approaching resilience. The social dynamics were there, the evidence base and the role of the scientists was there, and importantly, the economic considerations were very much brought to the table with some interesting suggestions from UN ECLAC on how we could go forward in that regard. And the third point I want to speak to is resourcing resilience. And I think this was an important point that was raised, especially within the context of the climate change and the fact that from a policy perspective, we need to be inclusive, we need to capture social dimensions within public policy conversations, as well as inclusion of gender transformation. So thank you to all members of the panel. Let me just acknowledge you as I close. Her Excellency Epsi Campbell-Barr, Vice President and Foreign Minister of Costa Rica. We have Mr. Dario Jorge Giolo Sadi, the Mayor of Campinas, Brazil. Thank you so much. Ms. Maria Noel Veza, Regional Director of UN Women for Latin America and the Caribbean, Dr. Dave Applegate, the Associate Director of Natural Hazards here on behalf of the US Geological Survey, and of course, Mr. Rolando Ocampo, Director of the Statistics Division of UN ECLAC. Colleagues, it's been great moderating the session. Thank you so much for your invaluable contributions. We want to thank also our colleagues from the CARICOM Secretariat, Ambassador Douglas Slater, and also Ms. Miriam Irusa for giving their contributions as well. I hope you continue to enjoy the regional platform 21. Thank you again to our coordinators for the session, the government of Jamaica. We want to thank also our colleagues at UN ECLAC, PAHO, SEPREDNAC, and of course, the team at the SEDEMA Coordinating Unit. It's been great being here. Thank you for joining and enjoy the rest of RP21.
Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. I thought Elizabeth Riley, Executive Secretary of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, did a fantastic job as moderator, and we certainly take the opportunity to thank our speakers, our panelists, for giving of their time and, of course, their effort and their information. Certainly, some points that resonated with me is the fact that the vulnerabilities, the challenges and disasters that were discussed in that panel discussion is common to all of us. Really, it does not matter where we live or what country we represent. We're a part of a small region, and as such, we have the same issues and we are affected in the same way. The points that resonated with me also is that climate change is interlinked directly with the existing political, social, and economic factors that already are amongst us. The access to information, data exchange, scientific exchange.
Brilliant. And it was very easy to moderate this.
No problem. It's okay. Whenever we're dealing with digital, this always happens. They spoke about the importance of access to information, data exchange, as well as scientific exchange. So we get these insights, but what do we do with them? Is it just big data, or do we turn it into smart data? The communication has to be clear and effective across all boards for all stakeholders. This is a team sport. It's a proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you got to take other people with you. So collaboration and partnership, global, regional, as well as locally, is absolutely key. We have to identify the vulnerable communities and implement plans, assess needs, invest in intervention measures, and look at the long-term, the medium to long-term sustainability plans. And if we're going to do allocation of resources, we need to consider human as well as financial. When we look at recovery, response, this all requires a rethinking, reimagining, adaptable and agile preparation that is data-driven. And finally, when we look at the recovery and response, it requires diverse leadership, meaning vulnerable persons, underrepresented groups, underrepresented voices need to also be at the table. I also want to thank our panelists for speaking about the importance of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals in order to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. I really did appreciate all of the knowledge that was exchanged in that panel discussion. So we crave your participation. For those of you who are watching via social media platforms, please go ahead, participate, put your questions in the chat. And for those of you who are using the Hopin platform, don't forget to always click on your session tab, which is located on the left-hand side, and you can participate in polls and different questions and answers that are available at the top. So we will see you back here at 2. Please visit the Swiss Corporation virtual booth with special surprise events that is on the Hopin platform. See you at 2.
Script here, okay? This is for Emily. I don't know where Garrett is because he had a problem with no internet.
He's right.
He had no internet on his computer.
Oh no. Okay, so it's 2 links that I'm going to do. And for the persons in the room, please don't mind me. I'm just doing pre-recordings, so don't worry about it. Are we waiting on a cue from them? I was just waiting on the cue. I was just waiting for the cue to ensure that there's no other further instruction. If we're aligned, okay, no problem.
You're going to call link number 1. It is closing out the 2 sections.
Correct.
And a link to the official statement. Is that correct?
Correct. So I was told to thank the 2 moderators,
Yeah.
and then head straight to reminding the audience that they're to go and visit either the RP21 webpage or the Hopping platform for the official statements from member states with the government.
Is the regional sessions and the
It's the correct. I'm supposed to be welcoming those.
Okay. Welcoming them.
Am I saying? Yeah. Because am I rapping? Because rap is late, correct? Correct. So it's two links. Okay.
Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do, before you start your speech, I'm going to ask you to say recording link piece 1.
Okay.
Reference, and just say recording link piece 1.
Recording link piece 1.
We're going to do number 2, you say recording link piece 2, and I'll get our guys to chop it and double it.
All right, no problem. What time is it in Dublin right now?
About 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening. Maybe 9.
Testing sound, testing for sound, volume, clarity. Recording link piece 1, testing for sound and clarity. Hold on one second. We're recording here. We're going to record something. Thank you. Recording link piece 1. Such insightful conversations. Thank you so very much to our moderators, Montserrat Shilot, Regional Technical Specialist in Climate Adaptation, United Nations Programme for Development, UNDP. And thank you so very much to Dawn Skaggs, Emergency Disaster and Climate Resilience Specialist, World Institute on Disability. So now that we've just wrapped those parallel sessions, this is the opportunity for you to go and view the official statements. And you can do that by visiting the RP21 webpage or on the Hopin website or on the Hopin platform. You can go and visit the official statements from member states, intergovernmental organizations, and other partner groups. You'll also find pre-recorded videos accessible on demand. The conference also has 10 side events through the 4 days, organized by partners on a variety of topics. The first one will start now. So please visit the schedule to find the direct connection to each of them. Did we ever get a pronunciation on the moderator's name? Is it Rogerio? The Teresa, no? Just a question. The moderator's name, is it Rogerio or Rogerio? Rogerio. Rogerio. Okay, and is that Ocha or OCHA? Teresa? Ocha, okay. Mm-hmm. Recording link, piece 2. We now move to our final concurrent sessions. The first one, special session, is the Regional Risk Assessment Report 2021, or the Regional Risk Landscape towards an integrated, multi-stakeholder, gender-responsive risk governance. The organizers are the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDR, the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, the Global Network of Civil Society Organizations for Disaster Reduction, GNDR, and our esteemed moderator for that session is Carlos Uribe, Program Management Officer, United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR. The other concurrent session is the Learning Lab, and this is closed, so hopefully you would have registered in time. The title is Disaster Impact Modeling. The organizers are the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, the Coordination Center for the Prevention of Disasters in Central America, and the Dominican Republic. We also have an organizer, Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CIDIMA, and our esteemed moderator is Rogerio Mobilia, Head of Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean, United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA. All right.
DRR